President Joe Biden ordered the Pentagon to shoot down an object spotted at 40,000 feet over Alaska, less than a week after fighter jets targeted an alleged Chinese surveillance balloon that had crossed the U.S. and provoked a national uproar. The unidentified object, which was about the size of a car and didn't have the ability to maneuver, posed a reasonable threat to the safety of civilian flight, the White House said. The nature of the craft was unknown, though National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said it was far smaller than the Chinese balloon downed off the coast of South Carolina last Saturday. The Pentagon has deployed planes and helicopters to recover the object, which fell onto ice. The object was downed off northeastern Alaska, near the border with Canada, in Arctic Ocean waters after being identified overnight. The president was then briefed. F-22 fighter jets flew by to observe it Thursday night and again Friday before it was shot down with a Sidewinder missile, the same type used to bring down the balloon off South Carolina. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration imposed temporary restrictions near Deadhorse, Alaska, as part of the shootdown, barring pilots from a national defense airspace stretching from ground level up to 60,000 feet, an altitude far higher than flown by private jets and airliners. U.S. officials said there had been no outreach to China about the latest object. There is nothing yet to indicate what it was or where it came from, and no evidence it came from China. Its presence will, however, raise questions of whether there is any link to the Chinese balloon that was identified early last week and which the U.S. argues was part of military-led espionage program in some 40 countries. U.S. crews are working to recover the wreckage of that balloon. In a separate briefing, Pentagon spokesman Brigadier General Pat Ryder said the search crews had located a significant amount of debris from the Chinese balloon, though he said bad weather was keeping them from bringing most of it up from the ocean floor. He said there was no indication that the two episodes were connected while acknowledging the apparent similarities. "I think we are all, to include the media and the public, very attuned to balloons at the moment," Ryder said. The latest drama will only prolong the balloon episode, which has gripped U.S. and global attention since last Wednesday when residents in Montana spotted a white object high above in the sky. The U.S. has since argued that the Chinese balloon was sent deliberately by China to surveil the U.S. and was a violation of U.S. airspace. Chinese officials have insisted the balloon that was shot down last week was a weather monitoring device that blew off course. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning said Friday that the balloon was a civilian craft and its transit across the U.S. last week was an isolated, unexpected incident. Biden has said the alleged espionage incident didn't seriously hurt U.S.-China relations, even though it forced Secretary of State Antony Blinken to cancel a planned trip and led to an increasingly heated series of accusations from both sides. Biden has also come under fire from Republican lawmakers who said the balloon should have never been allowed to traverse the continental U.S. for a week before it was shot down. As the U.S. measures its response, the Biden administration named 6 Chinese companies to an export blacklist over what it argues are links to the military-backed espionage program. The companies had links to military programs, including airships and balloons and related materials and components, the Commerce Department said. It said the Chinese military is using high-altitude balloons for intelligence and reconnaissance activities that go against U.S. national security interests. ABC News reported Friday that the balloon's main undercarriage has been located underwater and is largely intact. The report, which cited U.S. officials who weren't identified, said the equipment had yet to be retrieved. The Federal Bureau of Investigation released photographs that showed agents examining the balloon's white canopy and helping direct vessels across the water in search of new material. On a call Thursday, FBI officials told reporters the Bureau had yet to access the balloon's main payload. In a series of briefings and hearings with lawmakers on Thursday, U.S. officials argued there was no doubt that the balloon was a surveillance device used under a program run by China's People's Liberation Army. They said it was carrying equipment with sensors designed to pick up communications signals and pointed to the fact that it had hovered over sensitive U.S. military sites during its transit across the U.S. Read, U.S. makes case that Chinese balloon was part of spying program. The Biden administration said the manufacturer of the device, which it didn't name, had a direct relationship with the People's Liberation Army. Attention was also shifting to how China sourced the parts that went into the balloon's payload, as lawmakers questioned whether President Joe Biden ought to have done more to limit the export of sensitive technology to China. People familiar with the matter said lawmakers were told Thursday that the balloon had Western-made components with English-language writing on them. Also, Chinese balloon had parts with English writing, lawmakers told. China's charge d'affaires in Washington, Su Xiuyuan, told a virtual conference hosted by the U.S.-China Business Council on Wednesday that the two nations shouldn't let this incident offset efforts made to stabilize ties. With assistance from Tony Capaccio, Courtney McBride, Justin Sink, Roxana Tyron and Alan Levin. The U.S. is looking to create a critical minerals buyers club with allies like the EU and Group of Seven, the U.S. officials said, speaking on condition of anonymity. The move would ensure the bloc is not reliant on China for critical minerals, particularly as the countries look to build out renewable energy pacts, the officials said. So-called rare earth elements and minerals including lithium and cobalt have assumed huge strategic importance because of their role in electric vehicle technology, defense electronics, and other uses. Especially worrisome to the US and its allies is China's geological fortune in having supplies within its borders and its moves to lock up agreements with other producers, potentially cutting off US access in the event of a crisis with Beijing. The deals, while aimed at China, could also make the countries eligible for benefits from the Inflation Reduction Act, soothing a key irritant over industrial incentives. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The Treasury declined a request to comment. The development adds Japan and the UK to the list of countries where the US is seeking critical mineral pacts. The US had already been in talks with the EU over such a deal. US-EU discuss minerals deal to widen scope of green credits. 1. The US has long been pushing to secure supply chains of critical minerals, including through a minerals security partnership that includes the EU, UK, and Japan, as well as other countries such as Australia and South Korea. That group held a meeting earlier this week to discuss mining, processing, and recycling of critical minerals with representatives of several African nations, according to the State Department. The push is part of President Joe Biden's effort to shift global supply chains away from China, blunting Beijing's clout in key sectors and hedging against disruptions, like the COVID-19 pandemic, that would upend supply chains or create scarcities that may starve US or other friendly producers. Part of the joint push is driven by a desire to make sure the US is not reliant on China for critical minerals, the officials said. It will also mean the US and its allies have access to the inputs needed to meet emission reductions goals, according to the officials. Participating countries would be eligible under Section 30D of the Inflation Reduction Act, an incentive aimed at promoting new electric vehicles, officials said. A pact that clears the way for benefits under the IRA would help soothe tensions with Europe, which has complained that the provision freezes out American partners. Biden's administration has responded by pledging cooperation and encouraging European allies to pass their own domestic subsidies. This is one of the most promising ways to go forward, German Economy Minister Robert Habeck told Bloomberg TV in an interview Monday, referring to a possible agreement on organizing a market for critical minerals. Ukraine's Air Force spokesman Yuri Inat repeated Commander Valery Zaluzhnyi's claim that 2 Russian missiles launched at Ukraine on February 10 had entered NATO member Romania's airspace. Romania's defense ministry earlier denied the Ukrainian commander-in-chief's allegations. Ukrainian radar system recorded 2 Russian Kalibr cruise missiles flying into the airspace of Romania and Moldova during Russia's 14th mass missile attack on Ukraine, Inat said at a press conference following the large-scale strike. Ukraine is waiting for data from surveillance systems and radars of international partners to confirm it, he added. Romania's defense ministry published a statement acknowledging that the missile did enter the airspace of Moldova, reportedly passing just 35 kilometers past the Romanian border on its way to Ukraine. Moldova confirmed Ukraine's claim about a Russian missile entering its airspace and summoned the Russian ambassador, Daniel Voda. It is not the first time Russia has used the airspace of other states to conduct missile attacks against Ukraine. According to Inat, Moldova's airspace was used at least 3 times to carry out missile strikes on Ukraine's western and central regions. Russia launched 71 missiles at Ukraine on February 10 in its latest mass strike, 61 of which were downed by Ukraine's air defense, according to the Air Force.